think this is the first time that we've done a hybrid where I haven't been in person. Seems about right. We'll see if this works. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you, Chris.
Oh, excellent. Thanks, Howard. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, this afternoon, or this morning for me. This is our first map chat of the semester. Our UW Geography GIS-PT map chat series is a monthly chat series that we have where we bring in experts from our cartography and GIS network to connect with students and those in the community. So thanks for folks joining in person, remote here, and eventually recording online. Today we have our state cartographer, Howard Veregin, joining us. I'm really excited about this because I've wanted to learn a little bit more about some of the changes that are happening with the datum switch. That's happening now. And it looks like Howard has a entertaining presentation ahead for us on maybe a more technical topic. So with that, I will pass it over to Howard. We'll have some time at the end to do questions in person, virtual. If you do have a question during, just feel free to save it till the end. We should have plenty of time. So with that, I'll pass it over to Howard. Thanks, Howard.
Thanks, Chris. I don't know how many of you know this, but Chris worked in the state cartographer's office. I don't know how many years ago it was, Chris. 4 or 5, I think. As a student in before you left and got a job outside the university. So Chris is pretty familiar with some of the things we do. Most of you know me, so I'm kind of going to skip most of the introduction and so on, but for a couple of students who are here and online. Again, my name is Howard Veregin. I'm the Wisconsin State Cartographer. We are the State Cartographer's Office, sometimes we call it the SCO or the SCO, is an office here on campus. It's a special program. This year, 2024, is our 50th anniversary. We were founded in 1974, before some of you were alive. So we've been around for a long time. We do a lot of work with state agencies and local governments, get involved in helping them, improve their mapping programs and so on. We also work very closely with private citizens. We work closely with students. Chris is an example that we currently have 4 students. Varies a little bit from month to month working on different projects for us. So we do play students interested in getting experience with real life GIS and so on. It's actually and if you also have questions, advice, want to find some information or some data, the State Cartographer's Office, sco.vis.edu is showing. A great place to go. And of course, we also work very closely with Jamie Martindale and Robinson Library and some of the data portals and catalogs. Our focus is Wisconsin. So if you're doing a project in Indonesia and you want to have a question about map projections or something, might not be able to offer that much advice, but maybe in just in a general sense. But U.S. focus, Wisconsin focus specifically. Yeah. Okay, so today we're going to talk about, yes, kind of a technical topic. It's related to the NSRS, which is the acronym for the National Spatial Reference System. The National Spatial Reference System, NSRS. And the NSRS is being updated. The new system, NATRF2022, is going to replace a lot of the datums that we in the GIS and geospatial community have been using for decades. It's labeled 2022, but it's not finalized yet because it's the federal government and that's what they're delaying. So 2026 is probably when this all will go out. And it's going to have significant implications for the data that background. I was mentioning earlier, we have enough slides for probably about 2 hours, because it's a deep topic. I mean, so we're not going to talk 2 hours. So this will give you a start. We'll go from there. Okay. So NGS, it's going to be a lot of acronyms. Try to spell them all. NGS is the National Geographic Service. So they are a federal agency within NOAA, which is the National Oceanographic Administration. And they are responsible for establishing the National Spatial Reference System. NGS is in charge of all this. They have decided that due to the increased sophistication and precision of GPS, GPS and GNSS, that kind of means the satellites that track location very closely. So because of the increased precision of these instruments, and because of the increased needs for high precision surveys for construction, for automated vehicles, et cetera, that we need to move away from the data that we've been using since the 1980s, specifically NAVD83 and NAVD88, the horizontal and vertical data that guide the locations of all the maps and all the geospatial data we work with. And they're going to replace those. And they're going to replace those with actually more than the 2 things I've listed, but these are the 2 things that kind of have most relevance to us in Wisconsin and North America. And one of those is called NATRF 2022. So sometimes this is referred to as a horizontal data that will be replacing NAVD83. In fact, it's a little bit more complicated than that, and it's more component scale. But this is the thing that's going to guide the horizontal location here. The datum or the system that we're going to be using to say, yes, this is 45 degrees north, 90 degrees south. That's where it is. And as a result of the shift from NAVD83 to NATRF2022, the location of what you thought was 4590 is now going to shift. If you had something in the ground that said this is 4590 based on NAVD83, like a monument, that monument will now no longer be accurate. Okay, there were NAVD83 and NATRF2022, that's horizontal, XY, flat line, right? What about vertical? Talking about the heights of objects, the elevation. So currently what we're using is something called NAVD88, North American Vertical Data, established by NGS way back when. That's being replaced too by NAPGD2022, the North American Pacific Geopotential Data. So this is basically resetting sea level. So that all of our elevations that we have measured, including things like the elevation of the area around your home, because you're in a floodplain and you need flood insurance. Those are all measured. Right? Okay. So the new NSRS is going to encompass both NATRF 2022 and NPGD 2022, and it's going to be official in 2026. If the committee votes yes, it will be official in 2026. As I said, all of our coordinates are still going to shift. Flat long, projected coordinates, if you're using a map, any type of elevation, they're all going to change. And in addition to that, what the new system is going to do is de-emphasize the traditional methods of surveying and geodesy that are based on static control, in other words, like monuments in the ground. I'm going to say, man, we don't want to use that anymore. We're going to use GPS, GNSS, and something called CORS. I don't know if that's abbreviation is here on this slide, which are continuously operating reference systems. So these are like very precise GPS receivers that continuously transmit their location. And if you're a surveyor or a geodesist, you can read these. And in fact, CORS is one of the reasons that, as you'll see later, we know. I'm not going to go there. I'll tell you that when we get to that slide. CORS is important. So we got CORS, we got GPS, we got GNSS, we also have something called gravity. The gravity, also known as Gravity for the Nation, is a huge project that was conducted over the last maybe 10 years in the United States to collect high precision gravity data for the continental United States. Why do we need gravity? Because gravity is the basis for elevation. Gravity defines something called the geoid, which is how we calculate something called metric heights, which are commonly known as elevations. And we'll see that in the slide. The biggest thing, though, is that all of our coordinates, flat, long, and vertical, are going to be dependent on. And this is kind of the really big change that we're all going to have to incorporate, because we've been through shifts before when, you know, every time there's a new adjustment in the things shift. But now your coordinates, flat, long, or elevation, won't be usable unless you know when they were collected. So in geography, in GIS, right, it's always lat longs, X, Y, now it's X, Y, and in time. So that's the most important aspect of this, and I'll try to explain how that works. Okay, so the shift is the shift. So the shift is going to happen when we switch over to NAPGD2022 and NATRF2022. So it's a one-time shift. Horizontal shift, how much horizontal shift is going to depend on where you are, right? Technically, this is due to, you know, they've discovered that the GRS-80 ellipsoid. So an ellipsoid is a mathematical construct that sort of kind of defines the shape of the Earth in a generalized way. And due to decades of GPS and GNSS recordings, the wizards at NGS, National Geographic Survey, have determined that it's in the wrong place. And it's going to be moving by like a meter. And it's going to be aligned to the center of the Earth's needs, which of course is also always changing where the center is, but they're going to fix it. Okay. And this is an important point at the bottom, and that is, you know, as we'll talk about it, you may be thinking in your head, some of these changes are incredibly minor. You know, I use GIS data, you know, I'm making a map of Wisconsin. I don't need to know if my coordinates are precise to the inch, less than an inch. Of course you do. But you are going to have to deal with the fact that the data that you will be receiving from people who make data, particularly the federal government, is going to be required, is going to be in this NATRF and NAPGD format. So even if you don't care about the extra precision, you're still going to have to deal with these crazy coordinates that are changing over time. Okay. Any questions so far? Yes.
I just wanted to ask a bit of clarification on the time aspect of it. Is this meant to like more specifically be able to model small dynamic changes in continental drift and God knows what other processes that happen over the decades?
Yes, and we'll get into that in a lot more detail.
Okay.
The continental drift or plate tectonics is a major part of the reason why nail right in there. Okay, but I don't want to. We'll talk about that in detail.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Well. Okay, so we talked about horizontal. What about orthometric heights are also going to be changing in Wisconsin? What did I say, by the way, for horizontal? 1 to about 1.25 meters. Our astronaut. Orthometric heights maybe by as much as a meter. So again, if you have an elevation for your location, when we switch to NAPGD 2022, that's going to change. Wisconsin is sinking. I'll show a diagram of that later on, but we're actually declining elevation over time. So the shift will be a drop. Now, I wanted to mention that there's some confusion sometimes about like height and what orthometric. So the thing that we're always interested in, usually interested in GIS, is orthometric. And we often call it elevation. Okay, and that is, I don't know if this pointer will work. I can see it online, but, what we're interested in is big H, the orthometric height, and that is the difference between our current location and something called the geoid, right? GNSS or GPS gives us little h, which is the distance between where we are on the surface of the Earth and the ellipsoid model. Remember GRS 80? So we need to incorporate the geoid as kind of a correction factor in order to give us big H. Now, why do we want big H? What's wrong with little h? The geoid is really, in a way, you think about it as like means. Remember we talked about elevation 610 feet above sea level. We're talking about the type of a geoid. So the geoid is a more detailed model of the shape of the Earth that accounts for variations that the ellipsoid doesn't capture. The ellipsoid is completely skewed. Okay. So yes, that's what I said. The geoid is mean sea level, except that it's really based on gravity. So this graphic is from satellite is called the GRACE program back in 2000. And this is a representation of gravity anomalies on the Earth's surface. So gravity is not constant on the Earth's surface because water flows to right its own state. Mean sea level is highly correlated with gravity. So the new geoid that we're going to be using, NAPGD2022 we're using, is based on gravity, not what NAVD88, the current vertical data uses, which is kind of an approximation. So it's all becoming a lot more sort of technical and mathematical, and right. Surveyors out in the field with their old-fashioned equipment is all gone. And now we're approaching this kind of much better type version of many of the components that make up our spatial system. GravD, or Gravity for the Nation, is a similar program to GRACE, much more detailed for the continental United States, and that is what the NGS construct their updated geospatial. Okay, so are you all like your eyes flashed over already?
I'm just thinking about every insurance and government agency in the country losing their mind over having to redraw every single floodplain flood risk map. You got it.
Yeah. Not to mention every surveyor in the country losing their mind because every single PLSS monument that's been in the ground is based on NAVD83, and to ensure maximum accuracy, those need to be reshot, each and every one of them. There's 300,000 or something like that in this stuff. All right, oh, should I continue or should I stop? I'll continue.
Yeah.
All right, this is not the whole story because I mentioned time, and time being the critical factor in some of this. Okay, so I think I said this already, but I'll reemphasize. So in the new National Spatial Reference, all of our coordinates, vertical and horizontal, are going to be dependent. So if we're thinking about our traditional lat long or XY, easting and northing, those won't work anymore because in order to accurately fix the location at any point on the Earth's surface, you also need to know time. You need to know when that location was obtained. Because if you obtain it today and you go back a week from now to exactly that same spot and you do the same GPS survey, the coordinates will be different. It might only be a fraction of a millimeter, but it will. The longer time period you have, the more different it will be. So again, this affects not just lat long, this affects projected coordinates for a map. Now why? This gets back to your name or your question.
Read.
Right?
Read.
So Reed mentioned continental drift. The continental drift, of course, was the, do you guys know about the history of continental drift? Wagner's like the hypothesis that all the continents were moving, and everybody laughed at him, and they destroyed his career, and he died in poverty, but he was right. After all, he was right. You usually call it plate tectonics. So the Earth's covered with a whole bunch of plates that are fractured, they're moving relative to each other, they're going under each other in some places, rolling up against each other in other places. And so what this means is that every time a plate moves, and they're moving constantly, the location that you survey, right, is going to change. You go back a few days later and do it. So locations, as our astronaut says here, mappings that are changing, right? How do we do that? How do you make a map if, you know, your survey is going to take a year and a half, it's a big project, and every time you go out in the field, you know, your coordinates are changing. How do you make a map out of it? The answer, and it's actually kind of ingenious, that NGS has given us for NATRF, horizontal reference system, is that they're going to kind of pretend that the plate that we are sitting on, North American plate, is completely stable and rigid, and it's just kind of moving around. So relative to all other points on that plate, nothing's changing, right? It's just relative to stuff in Europe, South America, and the rest of the world. But if we can accept the fact that North American plate is a rigid plate with no internal deformation, then we can kind of pretend that the Earth's crust is stable. And that also means that if we have a survey location like this classroom here, and we take it at a particular time, like today, that we should be able to mathematically transform that coordinate back to where it would have been at the start of an epoch. So an epoch is a time frame. The starting epoch for NATRF 2022 is 2020.00001. January 1, 2020 is our starting point. And so any coordinate that you shoot today, what year is it for, has to be transformed back through time 4 years to where it would have been at the start of that. And NGS is saying this is going to work, but after maybe 5 years or 10 years, you know, our model is going to start breaking down because it's not perfect. So then we're going to redefine the start of the next epoch as January 1st, 2027. We're going to start all over. So that's how they're going to do it. So time for some blackboard instruction. Let's understand this transformation. At any point here, we can capture that movement of that point through time with this vector, and it has a magnitude and it has a direction. Okay, so let's just discuss the fact that if we have the data like GPS and GNSS and thing I mentioned earlier, of course, we should be able to track that trajectory. You know what direction we're moving and how fast we're moving. Okay. What's happening in Wisconsin? Well, you guys all know where Wisconsin is? Okay. Up here. In Wisconsin, we're rotating in a counterclockwise direction about 2 to 3 centimeters a year. So that's about how long your fingernails grow in a year. It's like an inch. So what, in 100 years, that's a couple of meters. So if your house is 100 years old, it used to be 2 meters kind of this way, northwest. And remember what I said about, you know, we need to be able to compute to be able to like go back in time with our coordinates. So the North American plate, which is this plate outlined in red here. Okay. The main component of the movement in our plate is the systematic counterclockwise rotation around this thing, which is in the title of the talk. This is the Euler point, named after the mathematician. I don't remember what nationality he was, but Germanish. Yeah. So in other words, if you were to take all these observations, all these years of GPS and so on, and make this map, you would be able to say that with a high degree of accuracy, we can model this rotation for Wisconsin or any other point on the North American plate, although the specific amount of rotation and direction and so on differs from place to place, but it's still a systematic rotation around this point. What immediately, that's right.
Trigonometry.
No, it's not trigonometry, it's algebra. It's something called an affine transformation. Any of the students, you talk about this in your class, affine? No? Okay. So an affine transformation is just a transformation where something is moving like this or shifting like this. It's a rigid motion transformation. So you take some, let's say, network of points and you rotate it. That's an affine transformation. You take those points and you like stretch it out in different directions, like rubber sheeting. Not much more complicated. An affine transformation is a very simple type of transformation. Account for rotation. And that's why it is used by NGS in order to model the counterclockwise rotation that we see on the North American plate. Now it looks kind of complicated, but it's not. There's two equations, and this one here and this one here tell us what is location, X and Y, of the point that we're interested in at the start of the epoch, 2020.1, given that we know its current location, which is X T2 and Y T2. So we know it's X and Y right now. And we want to compute its X and Y 4 years ago. And to do that, all we need to know is the rotation the degree of rotation that that point has experienced. Now, of course, the point, we get confused. The point is moving this way, counterclockwise. We have this observation, and we want to go back to this observation. So we're going back in time. We're doing a clockwise rotation. And a simple example here, where we have values for X and Y that I just made up of 100, right? 100, 100. We apply these calculations with a negative 22.5 degree rotation. And we can compute where T1, or where the point was X and Y at time 1.
Yeah, just a quick clarification. So is it either reasonably accurate or fully accurate to describe the tip of like the minute hand on a clock, the movement of that as being an affine transformation?
That's a good example of that.
Okay.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm just trying to be able to conceptualize this with a minimal math background.
Yep. Exactly what's happening. I mean, it's sort of like, it's really just it's a simple way, really. Now, NGS is actually, NGS does this in three dimensions, X, Y, and Z, because that's how they actually store coordinates, but I didn't want to get into that. So, but conceptually, it's the same idea. All we're trying to do is figure out how to get back in time. And we can use this model to do it. And that's what NGS is doing. Okay. Still have to account for vertical. Remember I told you there's vertical change too? Why is vertical important for horizontal? Anybody know why? So there's another problem, and that problem, glacial isostatic adjustment. Anybody know what this is? Well, if you don't, it tells you right there, so you could cheat. The last ice age ended when? 15,000 years ago? The Earth is still rebounding. Mass of the ice was so heavy, and the mantle layer is so plastic, not solid, that it's doing this. And places where the ice was heavy, it's rebounding upward. Unfortunately, changes in elevation also cause changes in our horizontal coordinates. Those are non-Eulerian velocities or motion. Here's an example. Here's our original surface. Here's Mount St. Helens. Our surface is rebounding because of glacial isostatic adjustment. There's Mount St. Helens. This is our kind of our pivot, right? And so there's an apparent shift in the location of Mount St. Helens. We also have to account for that. Good. How do we do that? Well, first of all, here's a map of horizontal velocities in Eastern North America. There's Wisconsin. The scale is different from our previous map. The order of magnitude here is about 1/10 of what horizontal change is. So currently in Wisconsin.
Wait, isn't that vertical velocities?
No, sorry, horizontal. This is as a result of this. So what that map is showing is this effect. It's greatly exaggerated by the size of the arrow. This is what's happening in Wisconsin. So in addition to the rotation, we also have this thing happening, right? And this is happening because, back to your comment, because this is happening. So these are the vertical changes. Okay. These are the horizontal changes that result from these vertical changes. And the vertical changes are showing that Canada, for the most part, is rising in elevation, like literally, whereas Wisconsin and most of the rest of the continent of the US is declining. And there's kind of a, we see this green line right through Great Lakes. That's the pivot line of the version. So you sort of think about this being the US, this being Canada, there's like that green line, here's what's happening. And that's because the mass of the ice in Canada is so great that it's just like, you know.
It's like someone stepping off of a trampoline. And there's the point at which the bending down stops. And that's sort of like an equivalent hinge line.
It's sort of like a,
Yes.
So to summarize this, right? We want to model plate movement. Why do we need to do that? Because we need to move our coordinates back in time. How do we do that? We transform our coordinates vectors. So we have to account for that rigid motion, affine transformation, and clockwise rotation around the Euler pole, as well as this sort of localized, this stuff, this thing, these horizontal velocities, which are the localized non-Eulerian motion. And to do that, they use what they call inter-frame deformation. Okay, so this is, if you're not sort of like thinking this is not an important point, try not to confuse the shift and the drift. The shift, which I talked about in the first few slides, what is that? That's what's going to happen when we switch over to NATRF2022. Everything's just going to shift. Easy enough to deal with that, right? But the drift continues to happen. The drift is a change in coordinates. And that's going to be an ongoing process because these tectonic are always moving. And that's something we're never going to be able to like stop. So, okay. Some questions.
Ask a question about the that point or pole, the Euler
Yeah.
point. What is the reason for it being all the way down by South America?
So far outside of North America, it's like, yeah.
Yeah, it's down by, these are the Galapagos Islands right here. Because that's what the data says. That is the point. You know, they've collected these velocity distance vectors for all these points over time. And when they run them through the statistical models to tell them what do the coefficients in our affine transformation look like, this is the point that it says it's rotating. For whatever reason, that point is, yeah. What? There's nothing, it's pure math. And other plates, if you looked at their rotation, they might rotate around a point that's right in the middle of that plate. It just depends. I mean, these are like gigantic plates that are just like mashing up against each other. So, anything.
I'm not the only one hearing that rain sound?
No.
Okay.
I'm wondering that too.
Okay, but, so there isn't like any chicanery happening in the upper mantle under that point, or?
No. No, it's just how it turns out. Right now, a million and a half years from now, it'll all be different, and the pole will be somewhere else. Rotation will be clockwise, or the North American plate won't exist anymore. Be underneath some other plate. Just it is what it is. Okay. Any other questions?
I think we end at 1, so.
We have to be on.
A little bit more. I'm like, yeah. There's a lot more to this, but so this is kind of important. Okay. I have to deal with this. These new coordinates are coming. What am I going to do about it? So how do you be prepared for this? When the alarm goes off and NATRF2022 finally becomes real, what are you going to do about it? Okay. I'm not going to talk about this stuff because I'm going to mention this this tool. It's important for some stuff later on. I'm going to tell you about Esri because everybody uses Esri. So what's Esri doing? Okay, but in order to understand what Esri is doing, you need to know about NCAT. And NCAT is really the authoritative tool for doing transformations and conversions. If you have data in one particular epoch or one particular coordinate system, and you want to convert or transform it, and those two terms mean slightly different things, but it's not quite one of those here. Then NCAT holds the authority. NCAT is produced by NGS, so they know, it's correct. It is by definition, it gives you the right answer. Okay. What's Esri do? Good job. Thanks. Esri is encouraging people to be prepared for an answer. I've listed this blog posting. Some of you may know about it already, saying prepare your data for the National Spatial Reference System. And basically, what they're saying is you should take all of your data, which is currently probably in NAD83, and you should move it up to the latest adjustment of NAD83 to get it ready for when NATRF2022 is finally released. The NATRF2022, I mean, that's not out yet. So you can't move stuff to NATRF2022 yet. You can only sort of move it as close as possible and then so, okay, this brings up this whole question of what's an adjustment? Some of you may have heard of NAVD or used NAVD or North American Data of 1983, which came out in 1986. But there's a whole variety of different adjustments. This article refers to some of them. There's one called HARM, which in Wisconsin we sometimes call 1991. There's something called FBN, which I don't think we use in Wisconsin, maybe, but I see it very rarely. There's 2007, And then there's a 2011 version. And every time any date is adjusted, they gave it a new name or a new number, usually in parentheses. They'll talk about NAVD2022 and NAVD2022. And basically, that was like a slight shuffle to move things around a little bit. Partially a reflection of the fact that with more and more accurate GPS and GNSS data, they realized the previous version of NAVD83 wasn't good. The latitude and longitudes that were applied by the system a little bit up, so they adjusted. Sometimes these adjustments are incredibly minor, 2 or 3 centimeters. But still, you need to know that they exist. You need to understand them for the transform. So, this blog tells you to, actually, this blog assumes that your data might be in NAD1927, NAD27, which, is that 29? Anyway, seems wrong. Almost nobody uses NAD27. Some people do, but. So we would be starting here with our sort of vanilla NAD 1983, also known as NAD 1983, 1996. We'd move that to NAD 83 Harn or 1991, and then we move that to FBN, and we move that to 2007, and we move that to 2011, and those results would be the final results. Very low. So it's like multi-step process. Okay, what's the problem with this? We all love Esri, right? We love Esri. But there's a problem. First of all, if you go into the document that talks about all the supported transformations from datum to datum that Esri supports, this document is, oh, I'm at page 131. This document's like 200 pages long. There are 624 transformations that involve NAD 83. And they give you almost no guidance on which ones to use. So should I use, if I want to go from NAD 83 90 or 86 to NAD 83 Harn or 1991? Oh, here's Wisconsin. I'll use that one. But the document that fellow wrote said, no, you should use this one, NAD 83 to NAD 83 Harn _ 47. Can you explain why I should use that? And there are many, many instances where there are multiple choices for you to make, some of which might be okay, some of which are wrong and shouldn't be used, but you can use them anyway. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. So this is confusing. And like I said, not really any guidance on which one I should use. Okay. So that's kind of the background of this. So let's do some tests. So if you use, I did a test where we compared Esri, kind of vanilla Esri, which you would get in your current setups if you used it, to NCAT, right? Which is the NGS official thing for doing transformations. You start with a point right at the center of a stem, and you transform it through each of these steps. So you go to Harn, then you go to FBN, then you go to 2007 and 2011. The result is that 4590 becomes 45.000005146 and negative 89.999, etc. Okay. 0.000001 degree is less than an inch. So these are minuscule adjustments that most of us don't care about. Okay. In NCAT, you can also do those multiple steps. Remember that our guy in the blog said, you must do multiple steps. You can do it in one step and it works just fine. So NCAT's smart enough, right? And NCAT, as we know, is authoritative and accurate. Okay, what do you get in Esri? Here's where we start. Okay, transform to Harn. So NCAT said it's going to be this and this. Esri says this. Okay, not wrong, but not precise, right? Not as precise as this one. I couldn't find an FBN transformation, so I didn't do that. But then we transformed to 2007. No change. Oh, transformed to 2011, still no change. Okay, so this is a known problem with Esri, even though they claim that you can do these transformations very precisely. The precision with which they hold coordinates is such that they cannot capture the difference at a scale of less than an inch in these coordinates. Even though they say, do this, the result is no effect. No effect, except the metadata is updated to say, yeah, this is now NAVD. Okay. The blog posting mentioned that you need to, well, maybe it's on this slide. Yeah, that you need to install the ArcGIS coordinate system data software to get the so-called NAVD 5.0 grids transformation properly. So when I was looking at that previous slide, I was in a fair comparison because you have to download this thing. Okay, so to download this toolkit for these definitions, I guess really, I need to ask our site manager here, either Nancy at Basel, for an account on my Esri, and downloaded this and installed it, and so now these are the Esri NADCON results. And these are the ones that the guy in the blog article said, yes, use these and they're magical. Okay, what happens? Well, remember, here's our NCAT. So here's what happens when we put the same points through the Esri transformation, step by step. Not quite correct, or not correct again, but not precise like this. No change, slight change. Here it is all in one step. This is what it should be. This is what we get out of Esri using these NADCON transformation definitions. Again, not wrong, right? Rounded off, that's not wrong, but it's certainly much lower precision than NCAT. And also, despite what the guy said, the transformation in one step from NAT83 to HARN to 2011, just like jumping one step, is basically the same as a multi-step process. So why should we do that? I don't think we should start messing with our data in Esri. I've asked Esri before about their transformation definitions because it's very confusing and didn't get much of a response. It would be nice if they could provide some clarity on exactly how they can. If they're not working like they say they do, and they're not giving us the guidance we need to implement that. And maybe it doesn't matter a whole lot for the projects that we work on because we're not geologists, surveyors, don't need sub-inch precision, but still, right? You should know what it's doing. So my recommendation is if you see these blocks, but don't start messing with the data. Maybe as a real class solution. Okay. There's a lot more to talk about. The foot is dead. Did you know that?
Yeah, I heard that the survey foot is being de-implemented.
It has been. It's no longer, it's illegal to use it. Yes. So there you go. Survey foot's dead. So we could talk about that some other time. I also didn't talk at all about the SPCI State Link Coordinate System, which is, you may be familiar with that. That's all changed for the country as well as for Wisconsin. So we can talk about that. So there are a lot of other topics here. And you know, I'm still giving this a very superficial treatment because I'm not a geologist. So if you want to learn more, go to the NGS.gov. They have a lot of recorded videos, previous seminars they've given, and they will give you a lot more detail about other components of NSRS, other parts of the model that I haven't talked about, as well as kind of the deeper dive. Well, any other questions?
Just a Nasus last week, so we could have asked him,
Who was that name?
the guy that wrote that blog post.
Finally. Yeah, it would be, I thought, and get him to come to.
Yeah.
Well.
I've talked to a number of insurance agencies at career fairs, and most of the people behind the counter, the recruiters that they have behind the table, not even career GIS, despite their entire business model being pretty much hopelessly reliant on it in terms of like risk analysis and even just knowing how to classify where a person's risk factors based on where they're from. And this is yet another thing that I can imagine come 2026, assuming it's in on time. Come 2026, every insurance company is going to suddenly discover that they need to do all of this. And I'm just imagining the chaos it's going to cause.
Super interesting.
Right.
All right.
Thanks, Howard.
Any online questions?